First aid in the woods is obviously about your own personal safety, so the main priority would be, as you approach the situation, is to assess to make sure it's safe for you to approach. There is no point you becoming a casualty and being of no use to the patient. One of your priorities with managing a casualty would be to put some personal protection onto some simple gloves. These gloves are made out of a substance called nitrile, ideally avoiding latex for some people that have a latex allergy. So personal protection is vitally important. Rich here, who's going to be the casualty today. Rich actually has cut his finger here. He's done that on pulling through bracken. Ideally you should be snapping the bracken at the bottom or cutting it at the bottom. Putting your hand through bracken is as good as putting your hand through razor blades, to be honest.
So,
silly man. And the procedure here would be to actually make the bleed a little bit more, so actually give it a good squeeze. You can do that yourself, or the casualty can do that. And the idea of this is that if any nasties have got into that injury, hopefully it will push those out. And then we're going to rinse it, whether we've got water or ideally an alcohol-free wipe if you haven't got water available. And then we're going to put on a very simple plaster to keep it nice and clean. Before wiping the injury with an alcohol-free wipe, just make sure there's nothing sticking in the injury, a thorn, a small twig or something like that. We're just applying a fake injury here onto Rich's arm just to demonstrate the management of a slightly bigger bleed. The injury that we're dealing with now could have been caused by again by a knife slipping in much deeper into the arm. A blunt knife is more dangerous than a sharp knife. This could be a nail, it could be a piece of glass. So this is how we're going to manage this deeper injury. So this is a sort of fairly standard bandage that you would find in the majority of first aid kits. I have a number of these available in the first aid kit. It is a sterile dressing. We'll expose the bandage and the pad. This part I'm exposing at the moment is actually the bandage, and then eventually we're going to expose the sterile pad, and that's the part that's actually going to obviously go over the injury. And the first thing I'm going to ask Rich to do is just place his hand over the injury and give that a really good squeeze, and also elevate that arm. By elevating the arm, that will now put the injury above the level of the heart and help reduce the blood flow. I've got my bandage ready and I'm going to basically take over this pressure, take Rich's hand off, place the pad over the injury itself, and then start to wrap the long part of the bandage around the pad, nice and firm. We need some decent pressure over that injury to control the bleed, and basically just wrap up and down over the top of that dressing. And when we end up with this short end of the longer part of the bandage, I can now very simply tie that off. And the easiest thing to tie it off with would be a bow. The wonderful thing about doing a bow is that if I did need to take that off for any reason, it's very easy to undo. So we're going to keep the arm elevated. We're also going to assess the pad. If we saw blood coming through that dressing, we would then put another pad over the top of that and wrap it round with further pressure. Ideal for sort of medium-sized bleeds, the typical bandage you get in a first aid kit. We could improvise. We could use a t-shirt. We could use an item of clothing. It's not always the cleanest, but at the end of the day, the more important thing here is to control the bleed and not actually be hugely worried about that infection side. It's obviously a concern, but at the moment I want to stop the red stuff from coming out. The next bleed that we're going to deal with is that bigger, more major bleed, and what we're going to introduce you to is what's called the trauma or emergency bandage. Far more substantial bandage compared to a normal first aid dressing, and as you can see here we have this bar on top of the pad itself, and this will help deliver probably about 30 pounds of pressure over the injury. At the end of the dressing here is actually a loop. The idea of the loop is that this can be self-applied, so if you needed to put the dressing on yourself, you can do so. We won't need it in this case because I'm going to apply this to the patient. Place it over the injury, and what's important is that the injury is alongside the bar, the pressure bar, and I'm going to wrap around and through the bar and then back round, and this is where we start to apply pressure over the injury. then wrap round. And a little trick here is to twist the bandage, which will strengthen the bandage, almost making like a cord. And at this point I can now put some really good pressure down onto the injury by pulling down and then wrapping the rest of the bandage round until we expose this clip, and we take that last wrap of bandage and we can clip that on. Within the clip is some teeth that will be held in place. The great advantage of the trauma bandage is that if I need to do anything else on the patient, maybe there's another bleed, another first aid issue, I can now free my hands up. This will effectively deal with the injury and deal with those other emergency problems. If you felt that there needed to be further pressure over the injury, what I can do, instead of clipping off the clip at this point, is take the last wrap of bandage, take the clip underneath the bandage, and then start to twist, and this will really start to tighten up the bandage even further, which I'm sure Rich is probably now feeling that, and then clipping the bar in place and secure. And I would only do that if I felt it needed even more pressure over the injury to control the bleed. Where possible, I would have that elevated for the benefits of reducing the blood flow. One of the issues with blood loss, in this case with a major bleed, is the patient going into shock. And the way we're going to manage that is actually to get the casualty carefully to the floor and lay him on his back. Bring him back. And with the legs, we're going to raise them up, ideally as high as possible. So what we're going to do here is actually temporarily borrow the blood from the legs and send it back down to the most vital organs of the body, which is from here up to here. We would also keep the injury elevated, so that way we're compensating for the shock and controlling the bleed. We've managed the patient as much as we can. Obviously it would be vital to have the ambulance service on its way. I'm talking to the patient, giving them confidence and just reassessing any problems that might be occurring with the patient. Okay, Rich, so the ambulance is going to be here shortly. Everything's going to be all right. We've controlled your bleed. In the extreme cases of a catastrophic bleed, a tourniquet can be applied. To use a tourniquet, you do actually need to do a specific 2-hour training course to be deemed competent in its use. If you didn't have a purpose-built tourniquet, it is accepted that we can improvise. That might be again with clothing, maybe the triangular bandage, which is one of the things you would have in your first aid kit. At the end of the day, if it meant saving somebody's life, it would be needed. Further training can really build on your confidence with first aid, and it truly is life-saving. It's what we do as first aiders before the arrival of the ambulance service that really can make the difference and save somebody's life.